So welcome everybody to our virtual reality, alternate reality webinar. It's going to start off as kind of a panel introduction. We've got four great panelists here. I'll have them all kind of introduce themselves, talk about their experience in the space, and then we'll have some leading discussion questions just to get the ball rolling, but then we can open it up to the rest of you guys. And it's an open discussion, ask whatever questions you have. And of course, panelists, you can ask each other questions as well, since this is your first time meeting each other as also. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Jocelyn Twasson. I'm the Ian Marketing Consultant Community Manager. I've been working here with Ian Marketing for a little over 2 years, putting on events kind of like this, mostly in person at our Redwood City office, but helping our community of consultants stay abreast with new topics and trends in marketing. So first off, we've got Sipra Thakur. She is also a marketing consultant down in the LA area. And then we also have David Stone, who is a partner and creative director for The Human Expansion. It is a production company. We also have Louis Vera, who is a founder of Vada Bing, which is a v-commerce platform for retail shopping. And then we also have Sean Deckers, who is a visual designer. And I'll have each of them kind of introduce themselves a little bit more in depth, and then also talk a little bit more about what work they've done with virtual reality. Sipra, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Thanks for the intro. So as Jocelyn said, I'm Sipra. So I used to head up the digital marketing group at IMAX, most recently before leaving to start my own consulting this year. So with IMAX, I worked on a lot of VR experiences with the major Hollywood studios, which included experiences like Interstellar, The Jungle Book, Divergent series Allegiant. And then in addition to that, we also launched a location-based VR center, IMAX VR, which is across from the Grove down here. And that's a place where you can go in and experience VR yourself, kind of like a video game arcade, to put it simply, but it's meant for VR purposes.
Great, thanks, Sipra. David, do you want to go next?
Yeah, nice to meet everybody else on the panel. So I used to be at Ogilvy & Mather, a advertising agency, where I ran the film operations for the US West Coast. That involved doing a lot of exploration into VR and AR a couple years ago, when that was just sort of becoming a big hit at the time. Since then, I've started the Human Expansion Company, and we are a production company, creative agency for smaller businesses. We produce VR projects and AR projects, as well as regular commercial projects for larger businesses and agencies. We're currently in the process of posting a luxury hotel walkthrough. We've done concert VR films and games before in VR.
Great. Thanks, David. Louis, do you want to go next?
Sure. Okay, so hi, everybody. So basically, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been creating companies around technology for retail for 25 years now. I'm currently just founded my 4th company. And about 2 years ago, after working in retail for a long time, I realized that there was a big opportunity to help e-commerce. And basically concluded that what was really missing was the interface piece of what is the human interaction with just a flat screen, just a regular. So saw that VR was a really good tool to really enhance the experience and make it work. So been working with several big retailers, are making a lot of progress, and it's a very interesting concept. I'm also currently involved with another company, which I also founded or co-founded, that we have robots go around the store capturing the data. So it actually enables us to digitize the existing brick and mortar store. So that way we can feed it into the VR environment, retail environment.
Great. Thanks, Louis. And Sean, that leaves you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a product designer with Digital McKinsey Innovation Labs, alumni from a couple years at IDEO. Right now working with VR and AR in more applied product design capacity. So not really VR, but using the same technology and applying it to a lot of different things. Before that, I had about a decade-long experience in feature film and advertising and visual effects and 3D. So have worked with a lot of the tools and have done various VR experiences over the years.
Great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so to kick it off and get a little bit more discussion going, I guess, and feel free, any of you guys panelists, to jump in and answer the questions I've got here. But, you know, the difference between virtual reality and alternate reality, what are some of the most common uses for it that you guys are seeing for different companies?
Sure, I can start off with some of that. So for VR, I'll speak specifically to my experience with it too. It was used very much as a marketing tool with what we were doing already alongside the films from that perspective with it. So I think part of the challenge we have with it, and part of the ongoing things that I've seen other companies struggle with as well, is that some of the PR value from it has gone away. So when we were starting out, we would get a lot of press pickup with it because it was new and innovative within that. And then as we started to do these more with other films and other marketing projects, the PR value kind of diminished because it was becoming more commonplace with that. So I think from that perspective, it's been kind of the challenge with it. And then from an augmented reality standpoint, I'm sure some of the other panelists can speak to better than I can with it, but I think Snapchat was a really good introduction for people and how we can integrate that into our everyday life and from a marketing standpoint with it. I think there's a lot of opportunity within that platform to explore as well. So if anyone wanted added from an AR standpoint.
Yeah, well, our experience is so VR and AR are essentially the same technologies. Are very, I think eventually they will merge into one. Where you'll be able to switch from one or the other. From my perspective, I think what VR gives you is the ability to teletransport yourself, and I think it's the ultimate storytelling machine that humanity has ever invented. So what it does is for I think for marketers and people that want to in our space where we're creating an online shopping platform, it enables the ultimate tool for the brands to tell a story. So if you can get people to get into your space, you'll be able to tell a very good story. And then teletransportation basically enables you to take to go wherever you want to go or wherever you want to take that person. So it's a really powerful tool to do a lot of things that are typically have not been included in a shopping experience. So that's VR. And AR basically gives you the ability, like it says, augmented reality. It gives you the ability to make real live experiences much more powerful. So what we're seeing that in the retail sector is we envision that you'll be able to use the same kind of things where marketers will be able to, make their labels do things and talk and things, but more in the real environment.
To add on to that, from our perspective, we really see the same sort of stuff that you were just mentioning in terms of virtual reality, Luis, being an amazing storytelling tool. The transportation ability is incredible. It's an amazing experience, and we really have seen VR taking off as more of an experiential marketing tool from our standpoint. Whereas AR is much more accessible, both at the moment and then really moving forward with the new phones coming out with ARKit and the new iPhone 10. There's some browser-based AR platforms that are coming out that you can just click a link in your phone and suddenly you'll have the ability to move your phone around and experience the world with different augmented layers on there. So there's a little bit more accessibility just in the sense that more people have access now through their mobile phones to AR, whereas VR, to really get the full VR experience, you want to have the headset on. It's incredible, but there's a smaller audience still for the to reach with a headset on, whereas you can still access that content as 360-degree content if you look at your phone, but it's not quite the same level of experience. It's not quite the same teleportation as it would be wearing a headset. You know, we view the difference between the headset and viewing VR on your mobile phone would be the difference between being somewhere and viewing something through a small window or shining a flashlight in the dark. But the possibilities are really amazing right now. There's incredible possibilities for both technologies.
Yeah. What industries do you guys see are most, I guess, are using VR well right now, or have the potential to be using VR well right now?
I'd probably say gaming from that perspective with it. I think they have a lot more of the touch point. There was actually an announcement today, or the head of PlayStation was on Business News this morning on CNBC, and they were talking about their push this holiday season is going to be for the gaming consoles and the VR headsets with it. It kind of goes hand in hand from a penetration standpoint, because that community is more susceptible and open to embracing these technologies. And so where I've seen, and then working at IMAX, just seeing from the VR center as well, that community is really good. And I think that what I've seen is probably the way that it's going to penetrate the market the best through that is through gaming.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that gaming is basically, I think that's where the big bet was done initially, and that's where people have put their money and the effort and the whole dream behind how to make this pervasive. Because the big problem is that there are no headsets, or there's no, like, if you're a surfer, you don't have a wave to surf on. So, you know, I do agree that, you know, gaming is the way you're going to get into people's homes. Eventually, if you're into people's homes, you'll be able to do a whole bunch of more things that are, you know, taking advantage of what we were talking about before, which is the teletransportation ability and the storytelling ability. I think education is going to be a huge one because you can teletransport somebody into amazing worlds. You can use that to educate and do things. I think retail is another huge one for the same reasons. But again, you know, it's not in people's homes, so it's got to be. It has to be gaming that's going to get it into people's consoles inside their living room, so they'll be able to, you know, and that will open the door to a whole bunch of different applications.
Yeah, I'm also very excited about the gaming opportunities for VR. I think that beyond gaming, though, I'm personally very excited about some of the things that we're seeing in healthcare. You know, it's a little bit off the expected mark for VR, but there's a lot of institutions that are now exploring healthcare as VR as a healthcare solution for mental health issues. Burn victims are using VR for pain treatment. It's not something I understand exactly how that's happening, coming from more of a creative side, but it's really interesting to see the applications outside of just storytelling, where the technology is taking off and being more integrated into other industries. The travel and the real estate industry are also two areas that are using VR in more expected ways, I guess, but also more industrial ways. You know, real estate and hotels are using VR as a way to preview, to use that transportation element, but to preview what a building might be like once it's done, to preview a location around the globe, to you know, to instead of doing a timeshare tour, you can just sit there and wear a VR headset and walk through a property. So it's taking on other elements beyond just the entertainment aspect and becoming more industrialized, which I think is another way that VR can find widespread adoption throughout the marketplace.
Great.
Yeah, and I would add to that the interesting thing is that because it enables you to, the way it enables you to teletransport yourself is that VR actually tricks your brain into and your senses into thinking that you're in another reality. So that's exactly why you're able to. And I've got into these medical applications, and it's really fascinating how you can actually trick a person who's lost one of his limbs into believing that the limb is back and that he can actually move it. So from there, you can start to trick the brain to, you know, eliminate pain and stuff like that, which is really, really fascinating, and which leads me to believe that, kind of answering your question, that this is going to go way beyond gaming.
Great. Louis, do you want to talk a little bit more? I think from the other speakers here, you have a bit more of the, the consumer packaged good retail aspect of it. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what you're working on and kind of the niche it fills in the market?
Yeah, so basically our premise, and again, we're still early. This is early days because there is no wave to surf on, like I said before. What we see is that if you can, what we're doing and what we're working on is, first of all, getting users to, use this for shopping, and to get to that point, you need to make a better experience in going to the store, and a much better experience than to shop online. And if we look at the data points today, 2 to 3 out of every 100 people will shop online. And so it's a big question why, of all the categories, online categories, like supermarket, where we're focused on, is the least penetrated. And so step one is to get people to really enjoy that experience. But I think ultimately the big potential is that marketers, as I was saying before, will be given a unique moment when a shopper's actually making their decision to actually tell a story that no other technology that humans have invented allows you to tell. So we're working with different retailers, testing different types of ways to get people adoption, to evolve the user experience, and to work with CPG companies that have to work on what kind of message they want to give.
Great. Yeah, you touched on a great point there, Louis, about telling a story and creating experience. And you all have kind of mentioned that it's not just about using the technology as the pushing point, kind of as Sipra mentioned, but being able to immerse the users into a full experience. And David, I know you and I kind of chatted a little bit about that as well. If you want to go more deeply into how to create a good experience for your audience.
Yeah, I think the first thing to look at is why VR is such a great tool for telling stories, and for brands specifically, how it can be used in, to a great degree. And it's sort of it's a next step in the experiential marketing we've seen, and it's beyond experiential. It's the sorry that I'm blanking on the word I'm looking for. It's the relationship marketing. It's making you feel connected to the brand. It's the attempt to make you feel something through marketing now, through content marketing, anything to make you relate to a story that's being told, to give you a character that makes you feel something emotionally. VR is a really wonderful way to put out to put out emotional storytelling. And it's because it immerses you in the story that's being told. When you put on the headset, you are in the middle of an environment. It feels like you're transported there. You turn left, you turn right, the background moves with you. There is nothing beyond feeling most of the time. There's nothing that's really separating you from being in that environment. So it's more than a close-up. It's really an intensely immediate experience. Now, for us on the creative side, what that means is we can approach the viewer, we can interact with the viewer in different ways than we would have been able to before in a story, but it also changes the way that we have to think of that story. Things that work in traditional advertising, that work in traditional cinema, don't work anymore. Your cuts don't become cuts anymore. When you cut from one shot to the next, you're really teleporting a viewer. And if you say cut from a shot in the middle of a restaurant to a shot in the sky somewhere, it might feel like you're falling, and it's completely disorienting. So we have to think of ways to not disorient the viewer. And then if we want to, for some reason, disorient our viewer in a story, how do we disorient the viewer? There's things that you're in a 360-degree space. Past the first minute of looking around, and maybe looking around about 180 degrees, we find most viewers don't look more than about 180, maybe 200 degrees around them. And so to get use out of that space, to really make that the best experience possible, we try to activate the space and always put something in every corner. We look at the 360 cameras in quarters and in thirds often. And really, if you want to make sure that somebody's able to see something, especially if you're putting text on the screen, you want to have something happening in every third of the screen. So that way, if you're looking, if you're looking this direction, and say the important action is happening over here, at least a piece of that comes over to cue you as a viewer to look over and see what you're looking at. That creates a much more complicated pre-production experience, a much more complicated development experience, where you have to figure out, what's your message, how do you want to tell that message, and what's the most important part of being there to help convey that message? How does actually transporting yourself and teleporting yourself to that location help to convey that message better? And what can you surround your viewer with? What audio signals can you surround them with? What visuals can you surround them with that will make them feel what you want them to feel in a more immediate and visceral way?
To David's point on that as well, the challenge we have often, because you can look in so many directions and you have 200 degrees, 360 degrees technically of where you can see everything, is actually directing the user or how and what to look at from there. So if you're playing a game, what direction do they go? Do you want them to go a certain direction? And it's using those visual cues, audio cues, like he was saying within that, to direct the story a little bit more. And that's a lot of the challenge in creating content, because there is so much space within that, is how do you get the end goal and the user to look at what you need them to look at? So that's a lot of the challenges we faced when creating content from our side as well.
Great, thanks.
And I would say, just to answer that one more time and to add a little more, there's also a difference between the way that you can create content and the types of content you can create, both in Cinema 360, in Captured 360, that's actual real life video, and then something like a Unity created CGI 360, or something that might use the HTC Vive or an Oculus headset that has handsets that you can actually interact with your content. So those are sort of deeper levels of storytelling, and you've got a few different levels of headsets. You've got just the Google Cardboard viewer or a Samsung Gear VR viewer, which don't have that level of handset interactivity. But once you get to the handset level, you can add some cues that allow the viewer to sort of turn a different direction. You've got more interactive elements. You can add buttons and some other things that take you different directions. But those are all sort of tools and then challenges that add into our repertoire for how to tell a story. And definitely the most challenging thing, just to echo what Sipra is saying, is the most challenging thing is trying to get the viewer to look where you want them to. Because it's really the first storytelling format we have had that the narrator, your director for a film, cannot control the experience. It's really viewer experienced, much more similar to a video game.
Thanks, David. You mentioned the whole challenging aspect, and there's kind of been something that we touched upon when I spoke with each of you about the current state of the technology and how it's not as maybe widespread as people had expected it to be by this point. And can you guys talk to what some of those challenges are and what some of those obstacles are?
Well, so I've been following this industry for a long time, and I think the biggest problem has been the cost, but more importantly, it's the nausea effect, because when you get when you put on one of these masks and you're teletransporting, like I said, if your senses disagree with what you're seeing, and your senses disagree with what your body is feeling, you get sick. And I'm very sensitive to that stuff, so I get sick really quick. So I think since Facebook bought Oculus, it took them like 2 to 3 years to actually get it to a point where the technology was good enough to not cause nausea. And I think but that also drove the innovations and things they had to do to make it not nauseous, was what made it so expensive. So today, the price point is a big reason why it's going to be tough for people to adopt. Maybe a year and a half ago, to get a good system, it was going to cost you somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. which if you compare it to like a Sony console or an Xbox, which is what somebody would do for gaming, it's just in another different category. So the challenge is to get the content there that it makes it worth the while to do it. But nausea is a big it's a big problem, especially when you're building a company and a brand around that. If the sensation or once you get the mask, you take the mask off and you feel nausea, what you're basically doing is you're creating a brand that has a subconscious nausea to it. So so we about a year ago because we went into trying these Google Cardboard and these kind of things for experience because it was a lot cheaper to get, which theoretically would have far more adoption. But the truth of the matter is that we're just using high-end equipment to be able to create really good experiences that will want people will make people want to come back and do it again.
To build on that, maybe I feel like one of the problems that's been troubling VR is it's not really satisfying like a basic human need. I guess one of the things is that the suspension of disbelief you can almost easily get with just traditional film or video, and people are just kind of attracted more to the low-hanging fruit, and you can pretty easily find these experiences, whereas VR it's a little bit more challenging, and what you gain from it is probably only like a 10 or 20% improvement as to maybe what's actually currently out there, through other channels like Vimeo and YouTube and stuff like that. So I think once it figures out what its underlying need is, then it'll probably go a lot faster.
I would also say from the production standpoint, there's a lot of challenges in creating cinematic and captured VR. The technology has really been developing over the past few years. We have a lot of cameras run by GoPro cameras that are just rigs with 6 GoPros or 8 GoPros around them, and those record okay quality, but then they have trouble syncing the different eyes together, which makes it difficult for us to really capture, record, and then put the content together. The cost is very high to create captured or live action VR. So essentially the way it works is you're taking a camera that has multiple lenses around it, and you have to do what's called stitching to pull all those shots together. And that process is a little bit intensive. There are a number of cameras that have developed software now to make it a more autonomous thing. Even once you've automated that, it still becomes more of a fine-tuning element towards the end of it. That is very expensive. You have to have 1 or 2 or 3 artists sit there and actually make sure all of the lenses overlap properly, that you don't see any wrong seams. So there's a lot of extra steps involved in the process you wouldn't have in a traditional spot that make it a little bit challenging. The quality of the cameras available is still pretty low quality compared to a traditional cinema camera or a commercial camera, something that you might see on a broadcast television, for instance, that we're used to very high quality content now, from everything from Netflix to Amazon, and broadcast pipes out really immensely beautiful images. Every TV show we see is just at the height of cinematic beauty now. And putting on these headsets, even with the nicest, highest end, all-in-one VR cinema camera, you're not going to get the same level of quality, the same sharpness, the same dynamic range, the light and exposure across the image as you will with a regular cinema camera. So there are a couple solutions that are at a much higher level that are ridiculously expensive that we can shoot really beautiful VR things with, but they're almost an unachievable level for most brands. So you have to position things where your story is almost more important than the quality of the image, so that you can get the audience to forgive some of the image quality issues that we have with the technology at the moment. Now, that's something that is going to go away. Just even in the past year, we have seen camera companies come out with 2-3 iterations of their cameras. Firmware is updated on almost a monthly basis on the top-end cameras, and it's getting better every day. So a year from now, 2 years from now, we could have this conversation, and it might be a completely different story. But right now, one of the challenges is capturing really good high quality content. And making it making it easy to quickly edit and deliver your story off of the cameras and the technology we currently have in the marketplace.
I think to add to all of that as well, I think everyone brought up really good points, and the content, I was fortunate enough to be working with brands where cost wasn't as much of an issue coming from the studio side with it. So a lot of the content that was being produced was really high quality. It was crazy expensive. So as they were saying, it's not feasible for a lot of brands with it. But it kind of becomes like a chicken and egg thing from a content and price standpoint, because the price of the headsets are still relatively expensive for the good setup. Probably has dropped a little, like Lewis was saying too, probably now at $1,500 to $2,000, that kind of range, $2,500. But in order to get that cost down, you need more content out there because people want to go and see what they're getting from the headset. But content producers are having a hard time producing the content because it is so expensive and there's not that penetration rate out there for the headsets. So you have this chicken and egg thing with, is it going to be content that's first or the hardware that's out there? So that's a lot of the challenge from a marketing standpoint, just producing all of this that's come across with it. And then from a nausea standpoint, I've gotten sick on one of them. So one of the ones that we produced, it was for The Walk, and it was the film where I'm blanking on his name, but he was French and set up the tight wire between the Twin Towers at the time and walked across that. And that's the VR simulation that we did for it. And my palms were sweating, shaking, everything with that. It was kind of embarrassing because I was surrounded by a group of people, but it's fun and it speaks just to the power of it. It's just a matter of how do you get there? Is it going to be the hardware first or the content that's out there? So I think AR kind of is a good segue into that, into introducing people into what this is and making it more accessible. Because AR, as you know, you can use through your phone and people can become more familiar with that. The challenge with a lot of the VR stuff too is it's really hard to explain from a 2D standpoint when it's such an immersive experience that you really have to go in it and do it yourself to actually fully appreciate what VR is. So if you see like Samsung when they're, or HTC Vive, any one of them are talking about the experience, they're usually just recording people's reactions to it because it's too hard to say what it is and go out there. So from an education standpoint too, to the consumer, it's harder unless you experience it through one of these VR centers to see what it actually is.
Yeah, those are all really great points. Thanks, guys. I think now I'll open it up to anyone in the chat room who has questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up, or if you want to type it in, and I can share your question with the speakers. If anyone has questions.
Hi, this is Yvonne. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Yvonne.
Great. Hey, great insights. I appreciate all that are sharing details today. Wanted to just add another little piece of color. I recently left PlayStation and was planning for VR for the holiday season. And so a couple of things that PlayStation considers, I think, which is relevant to this overall conversation, is that last holiday, they didn't discount VR the way that they are this holiday. So they're deep discounts to penetrate the market because when you think about forecast numbers, they're behind from a total forecast perspective. And there's really content limitation, right? So because the numbers aren't where they want to be, developers, third-party developers aren't creating content because they don't have the masses just yet, right? And then another piece to mention that I may have missed someone talking about, but short-form content. When we think about this content, although as immersive, you know, it's so entirely immersive, it really is short form, and I don't think the consumer understands that. And when you're paying a large amount for a device like VR, realizing that it is in fact short form is something that I think that the regular consumer just doesn't understand. So just wanted to add some detail there, and happy to answer any questions.
You know, to follow up on that, I think that's a great point. A lot of the content that we've been talking about is short form content as well. I think among all of us here in my field, we focus predominantly on short form content when it comes to VR or web content, just because we're working with brands and agencies, and they're usually developing shorter form content to reach audiences. With the VR headset, something we find is if you leave the headset on for too long, it becomes very disorienting when you then take the headset off. So you have that sort of reverse nausea effect, depending on where you've been in that experience. If you're in that for more than 10 minutes, say, it really resets your eyes, it resets your spatial awareness, and you have to sort of take a moment to step out of that and react to that. On top of that, when we're working with short form content, it's a little bit different in the storytelling side of things too. We tend to cut things very fast in traditional cinema nowadays. In traditional advertising, you have a 30-second spot that may have 15, 20 shots in it, or 30 or more shots in it sometimes. So they're very, very fast. You have something, the average cut is something like a second and a half in traditional advertising. The VR side of that, though, is very different. If we're working with a live action shot, you may want to hold that shot for 10 seconds, for 15 seconds. We want to give people time to explore what they're experiencing. If it's something created CGI in Unity, you may want to let that run for the entire experience. It could be one shot that you explore a sandbox type area. So the way that we approach that and the way that we tell those stories while still staying short form is different for VR than it would be traditionally. You know, we sort of have to balance that, not wanting the experience to run too long, but also giving people enough time in the experience that they feel like they get something out of it, like they're experiencing something they would never otherwise be able to experience.
Thanks, David. I wanted to just add in a reminder, if you guys aren't currently speaking, just to mute yourself so there's not any feedback coming in. Thanks. Anyone else, if you guys have questions, feel free to chime in. Or if you guys, as the speakers, want to add any other points that we've either previously talked about in our own conversations or that you were inspired by other speakers' answers.
This is Mark. What's your favorite AR app that you've seen, any of the presenters?
Pokemon Go.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, Pokemon Go, I was saying.
Yeah, that is a big one. I personally believe Facebook is going to be the one to actually transform AR within it. Snapchat, you guys have, everybody's seen their struggles and what they've been having with it. And just even having brands who are on that platform actually show any kind of monetization or conversion within the platform has been hard. But Facebook, they have Oculus, they have all of the AR stuff there, and they have a team and a vision for it. So I'm excited to see what they have upcoming within the next year or two, because I think they're going to be the ones to transform it.
Yeah, in my opinion, we have, so I see VR as like, if we're looking at other innovations that have occurred in human history, I think the VR is like the playing with the propeller. And then the AR is much more harder to do to get something that's really valuable, and it's more like the jet plane. Because in VR you control everything, you can actually create and do good storytelling and actually control the environment, as opposed to AR where you have to make the reality sync to what you're trying to do. So I think it'll take a while to get to that, but again, there's a lot of, it's arguably AR will be much bigger than VR, but I think humans first need to learn how to do VR, and then we'll eventually, because it's basically the same technology.
Yeah, and I would actually go so far as to say that AR and really MR or XR, which is sort of referred to as mixed reality, is going to be really the place to watch from a brand perspective and from a marketing perspective in the next few years. Just because we've got wider adoption of AR technologies out there, that there's more people that can access that. And then the ability to reach people through that's becoming much easier. A lot of these barriers, a lot of the technical barriers on AR are being struck down now. So we're actually able to attach an item to something that's moving. So when you use Instagram or Snapchat and when you stick an item to somebody's face or to their hand, you follow it around, we're now able to create software that can track things very quickly, that can follow things. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a idea for where the technology is going. So it's sort of creating an experience that as the technology gets smaller, if we ever get AR in glasses or VR in glasses, something that you can actually wear that's a more wearable outdoor experience, you're going to start seeing more experiences that are a movable experience. When it comes to storytelling, you could have a geolocated AR experience that is connected to your phone's GPS that allows you to walk through a city and have different elements of a story unfold as you enter different neighborhoods, for instance. I think some of the more interesting things I've seen in VR outside of phones and outside of marketing at the moment, we're seeing car dashboards that are starting to include AR in the in sort of their future and their concept cars. They're starting to include AR dashboards to open up more of the dashboard and get you looking more, get you looking through the windshield rather than down at the dashboard more. So there's a lot of applications, again, beyond the phone, beyond the headset, where a lot of this technology is going to develop and become really prevalent over the next few years.
Yeah, I think in the applied kind of area of the industry beyond storytelling, we're starting to see like a lot of kind of fruits come from this push to really enhance VR and AR, especially in like machine learning and TensorFlow and basically just there's been a lot of energy and focus on GPU and all the kind of interesting things it can do. So I think even just outside of storytelling, there's going to be a lot more innovations to come. So I haven't really limiting this kind of idea just to VR and AR, but applying it to artificial intelligence and all these other facets that are kind of indirectly related, gives a really kind of interesting future for it.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, so I don't know if you can see this, but here we have a wine bottle, right? And if we apply this app, let me see if it works here. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, it's partially on the screen.
Is it on the screen? Oh.
There, yeah.
When the bars of man impede, for no cage can hold that which is boundless, no man stop that which is fated to be.
You see, so basically what you have here is you have a label and you have an AR application, you put the phone on it, and it actually, you're able to, the guy there is telling a story about, what it is. So that's a good application that, I think kind of is down what we're working on.
Yeah.
How are you getting people, if you're working on that, I don't know if it's live yet, how are you getting people to understand that they can do that?
In terms of what? From the marketing perspective? Or?
Yeah, like if I had that wine bottle, I wouldn't know per se that I could do that. How are you educating?
So yeah, no, what we're doing right now, like I said, following the logic that we're first learning how to use planes on propellers. We think the way to do the first step to do this is actually immerse somebody completely in a supermarket store. So as they walk through the aisles, they look at this bottle of wine and can actually, if they touch it, they pick up the wine bottle, they'll be able to see that character talking. So that's kind of how we're going about it. I think eventually, as people, as Apple, once they launch their glasses, or because I don't think people are going to go around with the phone in the supermarket kind of, it's uncomfortable. It's better, it's not worth the hassle. But if you're already in the space and you can actually do it, that's where the opportunity to tell the story is. And then once you get those clients understanding how to do that, then they'll intrinsically know what they can do. But Apple's got to come out with their glasses where it's easy to use, and and all the technologists say that it's going to end up replacing the flat screen. So I think that's how we're approaching it. But we're starting from the fully immersed. Let's tell the story there, and then let's see how we take it to AR. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, to follow up on that, I think this is sort of the content versus the technology and the adoption scenario again that Sipra was talking about before with VR. We really don't have that much AR content out there yet that does all that. We don't have the technology out there to experience it yet. Everybody working in AR is really at the cutting edge of what communications can do when you can layer over graphics over reality. And we're talking about technologies that are being developed, technologies that will be developed and refined over the next 5-10 years. This technology is not at a standpoint that we necessarily can go to everybody out there and say, this is the right thing for you to be doing with your brand. It's going to give you this. There's massive educational efforts that need to be done with it still, but it's going to become something second nature over time. So it's the type of thing where if you want to be a brand that's on the cutting edge, that's doing something that's never been done before, or doing something that will be a de facto advertising or marketing need in 10 years, this is really the time that we're pioneering all of this technology. We're developing the language and the grammar for how this works, both for AR and for VR. We're still developing the grammar around how stories are told in both these platforms, how to interact with people in both these platforms. So while there are definitely a lot of challenges to both of these, it's also a wonderful time if you have the ability to invest in it, if you have the ability to do R&D in it, to step in, to make a splash and to help to guide these technologies and the way we interact with them towards a place that we will eventually be working with them.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that AR, where we're seeing that the application actually is, and I mentioned I was working on with another company. I'm involved in another company where we're in the physical, and it's a B2B. We believe AR is really it's a great tool for using it for B2B, so for employees, for like more basic, not end consumer stuff, but so for example, we're using it to tell online pickers where they need to take the product from by using AR. So it doesn't matter if they have to have these big uncomfortable glasses, because the technology actually works with those. But it's more like you see Boeing doing the same kind of stuff. You see there's a lot of adoption going on at the industry level of AR, as opposed to, it's still very, very nascent on the consumer side.
Louis, I had somebody ask, what app did you use that you showed us? Is that your app, or is that?
No, it's actually an app. No, it's an app that's it's called the wine that I showed. It's called 19 Crimes. You can buy that in the supermarket, and you can get the app, from Apple Store. So for the App Store. So yeah, it's technology. Yeah.
Somebody else asked, what were the 19 crimes?
So there's actually 19 different one of those. So there's different characters on it. And, every person, there's one where the lady, got burned at the stake, I don't know, or whatever. So there's all these stories. They're using the technology to storytell, like I was saying.
Yeah.
And it's telling their story. So, we'll see how that actually works, but it's an Australian company that's the winemakers that are doing that. And I think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think that definitely tells to the whole novel aspect of VR and AR and how it's going to get people introduced to, utilizing the technology. But as far as in the long run, I don't know how interesting something like that would last throughout time. I
think one of the other challenges there that comes up, and just when you mentioned having to download an app for that, Luis, is that we have, we have apps that control the AR experience for the most part right now. So something that's been developed, and I'm not sure if this is the way things are going to go, if apps are going to stay the way that AR goes, but there are a number of companies out there that are developing browser-based AR platforms, so that you would just be able to get a text message or an email from somebody, or your browsing the web and you click a link and it just opens directly in your browser. So you don't need any additional apps, any additional downloads to be able to access it. And I think that's one of the barriers that we've seen that just to general user adoption out there has been sort of slowing the AR adoption, has been that you have to download another app. You have to download content to your phone. Space is limited on our phones. And, you know, every time you have to download, it just feels like more of a chore. So as we free this up and as we create an ability to just go through our browser through something that's already in the phone, as we make it more of an ingrained ability of the phone to be able to use that stuff, I think we will see more adoption and more people using those technologies and starting to understand how AR works.
Exactly, and now there's so just I think last week Williams-Sonoma announced that they bought an AR company where you go online, you shop just like you were saying, and then so if I decide to I want some furniture from my living room, I just open it up and I hold it up to my living room and it actually enables me to through the phone I can actually see the sofa I'm buying, but in my living room. So, the company invested something like $11 million into it, and Williams-Sonoma bought it for $120 million. I think, like to your point, I think there's going to be a lot of this. We're probably early in the AR, how that's going to work. We're probably early days. Apple apps. When they just announced the iPhone, there were people, and you go, what is an app? And then everybody was trying to figure out how to actually make it work. I think that's kind of where we are with this, and it'll get seamless, definitely. And I'm sure Amazon's probably working on the same kind of stuff, and so it's good. There's a lot of money getting poured into all these technologies, so it will get there sooner rather than later.
Interior design is actually a very interesting place for this as well. I was just having a conversation with somebody over Thanksgiving about another company in the interior design space that's doing the same exact thing, that's going to be rolling out an AR furniture placement program soon. So it's something that we see, spreading across different areas. It's something that may not directly apply to marketing as strongly, but if you have a retail brand, there are incredible areas and avenues to which you can use AR. I think Warby Parker, I may have seen this at one point, or maybe it's another one of the brands out there for glasses, has a glasses try-on with AR thing where you can load up a pair of glasses and then rotate your phone around and see how the glasses might look on your face. It's not going to be a perfect experience, but still it simulates it. It's for a retail shopping experience, it's sort of the next step in the Amazon type experience to be able to have that in the home try-on type experience.
Yeah.
Thanks. We had another question in the chat room. Somebody says, are there examples of companies who are leveraging VR tech for people with disabilities who cannot travel or are not able to experience certain things in person? Are there companies you guys know about, or even maybe some initiatives or projects that have been put out there?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to see a lot of different things being done, and it's pretty impressive. And so, I've tried on I've been in a airplane crash, things to help you, get over spider phobias, where, they start off with a little spider crawling, and then it's a huge spider. And then I've even seen this company that was working on, they were actually simulating somebody's death for suicides. So they'd actually, put a camera inside the casket and have like the family members come by and say their goodbyes, just to, be able to immerse the person on suicide watch to make them understand how much pain they're creating to the family members, so they can kind of live that and kind of gauge that. I've also seen, like I was mentioning before, some examples of where they've actually brought, burn victims. They put it on and create an experience where the pain level goes down from like 8 to 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 down to 3 or 4, just by doing experiences and things that trick the mind and make it make you divert or forget about the pain. So there's a lot of things, but I haven't seen anything like really, the mainstream yet. It's all early days still.
So one thing that came to mind for me, I'm just going to quickly interject, is, David, you sent me that one video from Excedrin where they made that AR video for people to experience what it's like for someone to have a migraine, how it can be really disorienting. And I thought it's interesting. It shows an affliction that certain people have, and it's able to model that for other people and experience that and understand what others go through. I'll share that in the chat room for you guys.
Okay. Yeah, I've also seen like reports that say that, this has the potential to eliminate, all the painkillers in the pharmaceutical industry. So there's a big, carrot for whoever figures that out.
All right, looks like we're coming on 1 o'clock, so I don't want to hold anyone over that time, but I want to say thank you to all of our speakers for sharing your experiences, your expertise, and answering our questions. If you guys have any other follow-up questions, you all have my email. You can send them to me. I will be sharing this recorded video, and then I'll also be sharing information from all of our speakers if you guys want to directly connect with any of them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.